the challenges and complexity that you all have raised so eloquently. I have to say, Professor Russell, you also in your testimony, the written testimony, recount a remark of Lord Rutherford, September 11th, 1933, at a conference when he was asked about atomic energy, and he said, quote, "Anyone who looks for a source of power in the transformation of the atoms is talking moonshine," end quote. The ideas about the limits of human ingenuity have been proven wrong again and again and again. And we've managed to do things that people thought unthinkable, whether it's the Manhattan Project under the guidance of Robert Oppenheimer, who now has become a bold-faced term in popular print, or putting man on the moon, which many thought was impossible to do. So we know how to do big things. This is a big thing that we must do, and we have to be back in the office to answer that email that is, in fact, a siren blaring for everyone to hear and see. AI is here, and beware of what it will do if we don't do something to control it. And not just in some distant point in the future, but as all of you have said, with a time horizon that would have been thought unimaginable just a few years ago, unimaginably quick. Let me ask each of you, because part of that time horizon is our next election in 2024. And if there's nothing that focuses the attention of Congress, it is an election. Nothing better than an election to focus the attention of Congress. Let me ask each of you what you see as the immediate threats to the integrity of our election system, whether it's the result of misinformation or manipulation of electoral counts or any of the possible areas where you see an immediate danger as we go into this next election. I'll begin with you, Mr. Amadeo.
Yes. So thanks for this. Thanks for the question, Senator. I think this is obviously a very timely thing to worry about. When I think of the risks here, my mind goes to misinformation, generation of deep fakes, use of AI systems to manipulate people or produce propaganda or just do anything deceptive. I can speak a little bit about some of the things we're doing. We train our model with this method called constitutional AI, where you can lay out explicit principles. It doesn't mean the model will follow the principles, but there are terms in our Constitution, which is publicly available, that tells the model not to generate misinformation. The same is true in our business terms of use. One of the commitments with the White House was to start to watermark content, particularly in the audio and visual domain. I think that's very helpful, but would also benefit from watermarking. Gives you the technical capability to to detect that something is AI generated, but requiring it on the side of the law to be labeled, I think, would be something that would be very helpful and timely.
Thank you. Ms. Bengio.
I agree with all of that. I will add a few things. One concern I have is that even if companies use watermarking, and especially because there's now several open source versions to train LLMs or use them, including model weights that have been made available to the global community, we also need to understand how things can go wrong on that front. In other words, people are not all going to obey that law. And one important thing I'm concerned about is one can take a pre-trained model, say by a company that made it public, and then without huge computing resources, so not the 100 million cost that it takes to train them, but something very cheap, can tune these systems to a particular task, which could be to play the game of being a troll, for example. There's plenty of examples of that to train them on, or other examples in generating deepfakes in a way that might be more powerful than what we've seen up to now. So I don't know how to fix this, but I want to bring that to the attention of this committee.
Thank you. Well, on that point and on both of the excellent points that you both have raised, I would invite fixes.
Well, I mean, one immediate fix is to avoid releasing more of these pre-trained large models. That's the thing that governments can do, because right now, very few companies, including the 7 you brought last week, can do that. And so that's a place where government can act.
Professor Russell?
Yeah, I would certainly like to support the remarks of the other two witnesses. And I would say my major concern with respect to elections would be disinformation, and particularly external influence campaigns, because with these systems, we can present to the system a great deal of information about an individual, everything they've ever written or published on Twitter or Facebook, their social media presence, their floor speeches, and train the system and ask it to generate a disinformation campaign, particularly for that person. And then we can do that for 1 million people before lunch. And that has a far greater effect than the sort of spamming and broadcasting of false information that isn't tailored to the individual. I think labeling is important. For text, it's going to be very difficult to tell whether a short piece of text is machine-generated if someone doesn't want you to know that it's machine-generated. I think an important proposal from the Global Partnership on AI is actually for a kind of an escrow, an encrypted storage, where every output from a model is stored in an encrypted form, enabling, for example, a platform to check whether a piece of text that's uploaded is actually machine-generated by testing it against the escrow storage without revealing private information, etc. So that can be done. Another problem we face is that there are many, many extremely well-intended efforts to create standards around labeling and how platforms should respond to labels in terms of what should be posted. And media organizations like the BBC, the New York Times, Wall Street Journal, et cetera, there are dozens of these coalitions. The effort is very fragmented, and there are as many standards as there are coalitions. I think it really needs national and probably international leadership to bring these together to have pretty much a unified approach and standards that all organizations can sign up to. And thirdly, I think there's a lot of experience in other spheres, such as in the equity markets, in real estate, in insurance business, where truth is absolutely essential. If you take the equity markets, if companies can make up their quarterly figures, then the equity markets collapse. And so we've developed this whole regulated third-party structure of accountants, audits, so that the information is reasonably trustworthy. In real estate, we have title registries, we have notaries, all kinds of stuff to make it work. We don't really have that structure in the public information sphere. And we see, again, it's very fragmented. There's factcheck.org, there's Snopes, there's, I suppose Elon Musk is going to have his Truth GPT, and so on. Again, this is something that I think governments can help in terms of licensing and standards for how those organizations should function. And again, what platforms do with the information that the third-party institutions supply to enable users to have access to high-quality information streams. So I think there's quite a lot we can do, but it's pretty urgent.
Thank you. I think all of these points argue very, very powerfully against fragmentation, for some kind of single entity that would establish oversight standards, enforcement of rules, because as you say, malign actors can not only eliminate quarterly reporting, they can also make up numbers for corporations that can disastrously impact the stock of the corporation. I'm going to...
If I just might add one point, we're absolutely not talking about a ministry of truth. In some sense, it's similar to what happens in the courts. The courts have standards for finding out what the truth is, but they don't say what the truth is. And that's what we need.
But protecting our election system has to be a priority. I think all of you are very, very emphatically and cogently making that point. Professor Bengio.
Yeah, I would like to add one suggestion, which may sound drastic, but isn't if you look at other fields like banking. In order to reduce the chances that AI systems will massively influence voters through social media, one thing that should have been done a long time ago is that social media accounts should be restricted to actual human beings that have identified themselves, ideally in person, right? Right now, social media companies are spending a lot of money to figure out whether an account is legitimate or not. They will not, by themselves, force these kinds of regulations because it's going to create friction to recruit more users. But if the government says everyone needs to do it, they'll be happy. Well, I'm not them, but that's what I would if I were them.
Thank you.